Thank you, Michelle. I'll ask first within the room. Is there any questions regarding this presentation?
As a user, Michelle, how long do I have access to my data in the front-end database?
So it's temporary in the sense that we have 3 different timers actually that run. If you create a temporary table and then don't access it, it gets deleted after a certain amount of time. Right now it's set for 2 hours. Once you've actually accessed the data, but then you sit idle and don't access the data anymore, the table will then also get deleted. And then there's a maximum of time that no matter what you're doing, it will get deleted. Because we're not trying to give out all this data and information. It's really meant for temporary access to be able to do some analysis. Because different providers have different levels of openness of their data. For some, it's very important, this idea of it being temporary, and that we're not actually giving people the data, but they can have access to it still.
So it can be different for different data providers?
Yes. And of course, public data. I mean, public data, of course, then is available to everyone.
Okay, so I'm now given the microphone privileges to all web participants. If you have a question, feel free to ask.
Don't be shy.
I guess I'm curious in a way as of the participants that are here, what way of accessing this type of data is most interesting to you? And is there another way of accessing data that wasn't shown? That'd be interesting. So I do understand that in WRAM 1 at this point, it's basically a database access. You write your own queries and joins and pull out the data you need. But there are a lot of other tools. For instance, once we have for cubes and other kinds of more sophisticated analysis and queries that one can run, you have all kinds of tools that you can visualize this type of information as well. So it wouldn't be just a simple table. It could be some kind of moving graph that's time, that moves according to time. This type of information.
Have you been looking into this web map services? To present the data as a web service, web map service?
Yes. That's an
Will
option
it be available as WMS services?
Well, it's certainly a possibility too, but we haven't implemented anything like that yet.
So the focus of the things we implemented right now was to give the users the opportunity to get to the data with their own tools. So if you would use a web map service, then you are of course limited to spatial data, and only partly all our stuff is spatial of the sensor data. And again, it might not be that simple from there to go on to do analysis in different types of analysis programs like statistical packages and so on. So we figured the most generic way is to give direct access to the database in some way.
Right. Should we move on to... Oh,
so this prototype now, is it available? Can we test and play with it if we want to?
The plan was to publish it by next week, the end of next week. So we'll be sending a notification.
When you go to the WRAM website at SLU, you will find a WRAM 2 section with all the development, information about development, and also information about this demo site where you can play around yourself when it's up.
the plan is also to publish this recorded webinar or equivalent within a week. so that if you want to go back and repeat some section of it, it will be available.
I should also mention that the data broker is running off the RAM2 system. So in effect, the demo system is a fully running production system, even if it's not production ready. The data has been obfuscated, so please don't put any of it in scientific papers, because we've changed it to protect the innocent. Yes.
So it's really demo data, sample data, but it's real. It comes from real sensors.
Of course, we want to have some feedback from you as a participants. What do you think is missing? What do you think we really should implement? Because next time we meet, this will be in spring 2014, we will basically present the system which will then go into full production. So basically now and maybe half more year, you have the chance to really get things into the system, get changes through where you think they are important. So please tell us. Don't tell us in late spring 2014 that this part is really missing, because then we have no chance to include it.
Good question.
I was just thinking, I didn't really understand the difference or why you should have this temporary storage database. Why can you switch between querying the whole database using this temporary database? I didn't get the idea behind it.
Well, the database itself is actually a data warehouse. That's in a very particular type of structure. Unless you understand data warehouses and can write specialized queries for it, you can't really get the data out of it.
Okay, but I thought you made a query first without ticking the saving.
Okay, the difference just in the portal is that you can show, instead of, if you're not planning on connecting to something with your own tool, the front-end temporary database table is really geared towards connecting with your own tool later and doing your own analysis. If you're not going to do that, then you can just look at it in a table format, or eventually there'll be more sophisticated queries where if you're just interested in a particular moves, you could query, or a particular animal, you could query for that, or battery levels of a particular kind of sensor.
Yeah, maybe even simple analysis, what I almost do not regard as analysis, like a kind of overview of home range, stuff like that. But we discussed it very hard if we should implement many analysis tools in the web portal. But the problem is that as a researcher, you rarely want to use the tools somebody else invented 5 years ago. You really want to go into it and use a statistical package to do a new way of analysis we haven't thought of when we designed the system. So we figured the best way would be to give the researchers full access to the query results, to the simple query results. They can do in the portal and then go from there and do their analysis, whatever they want.
Will you be able to download the data too from the temporary database, or as an option just get the file download?
The simple answer is no. When we discussed with the other data providers, it was mandatory that this means WRAM does not become a huge we have it all database from everyone. So we said we do not want to cache the data, we do not want to have the data, we just give temporary access to the data, to the query results which are coming back. And this also means that we, of course, want to avoid a button where you say, okay, download it now.
Talking about the query.
Yeah, I do. We want to avoid it, because this would mean that once you have access one time to all the data, you just could download it and then you have it forever on your computer. This is not the basic idea, the basic security thinking we had. The idea was that if a local data provider figures that you are a funny guy who should not have access to the data, then this access should be gone and you should not have the data. However, it is very, very difficult in technical terms to prohibit that you as a user can get to the data. I said yesterday in a discussion that we cannot prohibit that people take a picture of the web table and then start writing it down on paper. This is also a way to export the data. And there are so many ways to do it that you cannot prohibit everything. But we will not make it easy to download the data. This is not the idea. The idea is to make your query through the web interface, get back the data in the temporary front-end database table, do your analysis.
We've received a question here from Sarah Davidson. I imagine you'll have two types of users. Ones who want a simple, pretty GUI, and others who have written a complex query that they just want to run. Will you try and support both, or lean towards one of these options?
We want to be able to provide the ability to do both of those types of things. One way, for instance, now is to download a temporary table that has the data generally that you want from the provider. Eventually, you'll be able to download, 1 million rows, and then run that specialized query on your own via a tool. We do want to make the interface more sophisticated than it is now. It is very simple. So it could be very well possible to have a GUI interface with drop-downs and other things that an unsophisticated user can use, and at the same time have an option to just write a direct query. But again, this query, if you're going to write a direct query to the data warehouse as it is now, it'll have to be a specialized type of query, where you understand how cubes work or understand how fact and dimension tables are built together. It's going to be very difficult to write that kind of query.
We are thinking in to keep it at two levels. The first level would be for a user who wants to get access, let's say, to wildboard data stored at MoveBank and stored at in the WRAM data warehouse. Go through the portal, send in a kind of simple query. Give me all the wildboard data I'm allowed to see in this, maybe limited in this area for this amount of time. When the data comes back, you can do whatever complicated query directly against the front-end database. And as it is a Postgres SQL database with PostKeys or an SQL server, you can facilitate any of the tools built into these servers to do your query. But it would be I think it would be very complicated to have very advanced queries directly in the web interface, because there are so many different sensors, so many different possibilities to ask queries. You cannot do pull-down menus for every type of sensor, animal, species, whatever.
The other option too one should note is that one can create several queries that are downloaded to the front-end database, and then you end up with several different tables. So it could be that you want to look at how movement information about boar, movement information about eagles, movement information about moose, and then do some kind of comparison between them. If you have these three tables then in your front-end database, then you can do some kind of sophisticated query between the three different types of species, for instance. But perhaps maybe you should clarify what you mean by a more sophisticated query.
Okay. Sarah, I've given you microphone privileges if you want to try that again, or you could write in.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I was typing something, but this is faster. Yeah, so it was just a generic question. So I thought that was totally kind of the answer I was looking for. Yeah, I like the idea of letting people run whatever query and whatever query language off of the front end results. That makes a lot of sense.
Michelle, is it also likely that users will be able to save the queries and rerun them at a later date?
Yeah, well, that's the plan as a part of a more sophisticated interfaces. One would then have user preferences and options that one can set, which queries one has historically run already. There's a lot of things to the interface that can be refined.
Okay, I heard some typing there, but I haven't done anything yet. We'll move on to the more general Q&A session. Is there any questions regarding not the specific broker, not the specific warehouse, but WRAM 2 as a general? So,
Silence again.
yeah.
If we could just go back to Matt's previous question about the difference between portal and a web interface and the needed front-end database. There's obviously practical restrictions too, taking out a lot of data. It's not practical just to send it to a web interface. 10 million rows on the web browsers. So that's obviously absurd.
We actually limit what's available. Even if you ask for a query for 10,000, only 3,000 will show up in the portal window, table window, or on the map.
But will you get all 10,000?
Yes.
I mean, as we said, this web interface will be fine-tuned. So I mean, I can envision, for example, that you can eventually get back all 10,000, but not at once. So it's kind of the same way as web servers use tiles or start up with a coarse resolution, and first when you zoom in, then additional data will be collected, something like that.
Yes.
But it doesn't make sense, as you said, Michelle, to pull up 10,000, 1 million or 10 million or whatever data points in one picture because you can't see anything.
And of course, for a table version, if you're going to look at it in table form, you can do paging or other kinds of streaming solutions. But I think it'd be pretty unusual that one would ask for 10 million rows and try to look at a table on the website.
Right. If there's no further questions, I'll hand the word back to Holger for a final wrap-up.
Yeah. Let me get into the picture. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I hope you got a good impression how the WRAM 2 system will work in the future. In the near future, you will be able to play around with it, as we said, maybe next week or in the very near future, to test it, to play around. And please, please, give us feedback. This is very, very important for us to get feedback from our actual users. Otherwise, you will end up with a system you cannot use, you do not need, and then nobody is happy. So please, try it out, come back to us as soon as possible with feedback, with ideas, with suggestions, and then if we don't see each other in person during this year, but hopefully I will see at least some people this year on conferences and so on. We will have a user workshop next year around this time, and because then we will basically show a system which is fully operational. We plan this workshop to be in Sweden at least, but a physical workshop for, let's say, 2 days, so that anybody really can join in person and play around. And yeah, we try to make this somewhat bigger than just presenting a database system. It should be some bigger workshop. But let me come back to you with this. But thank you for participating. And yeah, keep in touch. Stay around, give us feedback, and thank you for participating. Thanks.